But I'm glad you're here with us, whether you're in Venue 2 or down in Muscatine, or if you're sitting in a hospital with Bob Topping, who is watching right now. So everybody wave at Bob. All right, there we go. Okay, very good. So let's dive in here. This issue of needing to please people, you will be miserable most of your life if you don't deal with this and get it under control. You're always going to be controlled by other people. And what's going to happen is if you need to have people happy with you all the time, you are going to end up living the life your daddy had for you or that your mommy wants for you, and you're going to miss the life that God has for you. And you're gonna live in fear of rejection all the time. So you're always going to be concerned with, I think somebody's mad at me. I think they're mad at me. Are they mad at me? Does anyone know, are they mad at me? Why aren't they speaking to me? They didn't wave at me today. And it becomes one of these obsessive things that will block you from being able to be who God made you to be. And you're going to miss the life that God has for you. And when you live in that kind of a fear, what's going to happen is you are opening the door to letting all kinds of crazy makers come into your life and cajole you and pick on you and drive you and make you say yes to things you want to say no to and make you say no to things you want to say yes to. And it's just a bad place to be. In your listening guide, watch with me. Let's read together. Proverbs 29, watch this. I'm going to have you circle two words in this. Fear of man is a what? It's a dangerous trap. Circle those. It's a dangerous trap. But to trust in God means safety. See, that desire that you have to have people like you and have their approval is not a bad thing in and of itself. In fact, that's actually a legitimate need that you have in your life. You do need the affirmation of other people. You just simply don't need it to dominate your life. Because when it dominates your life, well, I mean, there's nothing wrong with wanting your parents' approval, right? There's nothing wrong with wanting your spouse to be happy with you. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be loved and liked by your family and friends. There's nothing wrong with that, but you need to be careful with that. I mean, the Bible encourages us to please each other in many ways. That's why it says several times, don't think just of yourself, but think of other people. And yet, just like all of God's good gifts in your life, it can be abused. Is there anyone here who likes food? Can food be abused in your life? It was yesterday, yeah. And it will be today, too. Though I have it under good authority that things eaten on Mother's Day contain no carbs. You heard it here. It was in the Vatican newsletter. Anybody here like sex? And now everybody's like, my mom's here. Don't ask that, please. Yeah. Well, I got news for you. My mom's here, too, but she's in Muscatine. Somebody goes, you're going to teach about sex since your mom's here? Because every time my parents visit, it seems like I'm talking about sex. So I sent her to Muscatine. I don't know what they're talking about there. But you know what? You have a need for sex, but can sex be misused in your life? Oh, yeah, big time. You have a need for approval, but can the need for approval be misused in your life? Oh, yeah, absolutely. Everything God has given us as a gift can be misused. So we need to be careful of those things, especially this people pleaser thing. Now, follow with me in your notes. Trying to please everyone is a trap because, here's the first thing, it causes me to miss God's purpose for my life. You cannot be worried about what everybody else thinks and focus on who God created you to be. You can't do those things at the same time. If you're trying to be who others want you to be, if you're always trying to meet the expectations of others in your life, trying to fulfill their purpose for you in your life, you will miss God's purpose for you in your life. 1 Thessalonians chapter 2. Our purpose is to please who? God, not who? Everybody else, right? He alone examines the motives of our hearts. So when you try to please everybody else, you're going to miss what God has for you in your life. Here's the next one, B. It keeps me from growing in my faith. When you try to please everybody else, it stunts your ability to grow in your relationship with God. Now, I want you to think about this for just a minute. When God is big in your life, when God is big, people have less power in your life. I mean, that's the way that works. Their influence is quite a bit diminished when God is big. Now, on the other side of that, if we allow people to be big, what happens to God's influence? it's diminished. It becomes smaller. So when we give to people things that belong only to God, like that ability to influence, like authority, that kind of thing, we are giving to people what God has reserved for himself. God and people can't be the same size in our lives. They can't be equal in our lives. We have to choose, who are we going to give more to? Am I going to give God more influence in my life? Let him do that? Or am I going to let all my friends and my family have that in my life? Look at this in John chapter 5. Jesus says, you try to get praise from each other, but you do not try to get the praise that comes from the only God. So how can you actually say you believe in God, you trust God, when you don't care what he says, when you don't care what he thinks? That's kind of strong, isn't it? He's saying, what happens is when you're so concerned about everyone else, there's no way you really believe in God, because what you really believe in is everybody else. You do what you believe. And when you believe their pleasure is what's important, you don't focus on what God says. He says a people-pleasing mentality hinders your ability to grow in faith. Watch this, Proverbs 29:25. The fear of human opinion does what? Disables. Trusting God protects you from that. All right, let's go to the next one. C. It leads me to sin. It leads me to sin. Well, I fear what everybody else thinks. That inevitably leads to sin. In fact, right next to that, why don't you write the words, giving in to peer pressure? Because that's what it is. You're giving in to peer pressure. The very thing you lecture your kids about not doing, you are doing. That's who your kids learned it from. See, when I try to please everybody, I inevitably end up giving in to the people around me. Proverbs chapter 1. Dear friend, if bad companions tempt you, don't go along with them. 1 Corinthians 15. Do not be deceived. Bad company corrupts good morals. 1 Samuel 15. It's a story about Saul. He's the very first king of Israel, and he's just been told because of his unfaithfulness, he's losing his kingdom. God's going to replace him as the king of Israel. Here's what he confesses. 1 Samuel 15:24. I've sinned, I've trampled roughshod over God's word. In other words, I really haven't paid attention to it. I've just kind of stomped on it and gone on as if it's nothing. I've done my own thing. I've walked my own path. He says, I cared more about pleasing people. I let them tell me what to do. And what did that cost him? Everything. He ended up dying. He ended up losing his son. All right, here's the next one, D. It causes hypocrisy in my life. It causes hypocrisy in my life. When I'm worried about what everybody else says, then I'm always trying to be whatever everybody else wants me to be, right? Or we talked about this, the Greek actors were called hypocrites. They would come out onto the stage, and you might have an entire play done by one or two people who would go back, and between scenes, they would go back and bring out a different mask, wear a different robe, and put on a different mask. And so you might have one guy playing 3 or 4 women and 2 guys. And he would just come out and hold a mask up. That's what he's talking about here. He says, listen, when you do that kind of thing, you're being a hypocrite because you don't have the same face all the time. For this group, you wear this mask. For this group, you wear this mask. And you're always trying to be somebody else. You're like a chameleon. You adapt to your environment. And I got to tell you, man, there's few things as exhausting as trying to remember what mask you wore for who in what situation, right? Isn't it just easier to just be the one person? See, God doesn't want you to waste your energy doing this all the time. He don't want you to do that. He wants you to be who he made you to be. I mean, there's far too much of that. Far too much of that in our lives. God doesn't want that for us. Luke chapter 16. You like to appear righteous in public. In other words, you want public approval. But God knows your hearts. What this world honors is detestable in the sight of God. He says, knock off the hypocrisy and all the posing. Be the real deal. All right, here's the next one, E. It blocks my witness. So it causes me to miss God's purpose for my life, keeps me from growing in my faith. It's going to lead me into sin every time. It causes me to be a hypocrite. It blocks my witness. Say, well, how does it block my witness? I cannot tell you as a law enforcement chaplain how many times I have been in the car when we have arrested someone for DUI, and when they find out there's a chaplain in the car, they all want to tell me what great Christians they are. They're like, dude, you just got busted for public safety problems. You don't have a good witness at this moment. See, when you try to please everybody, that silences your ability to share some very simple truths of who Jesus is and how he has changed your life. You're blowing 2.0. Jesus has not changed much of your life. You've got to deal with that. You've got to answer for that. See, when you're trying to please everybody, hey, have another one on me. You're not doing that. John 7. No one had the courage to speak favorably about Jesus in public, for they were afraid of getting in trouble with the people who didn't like Jesus. John 12. Many people did believe in him. That's Jesus. They did believe in Jesus, however, including some of the Jewish leaders. But they wouldn't admit it for fear that the Pharisees would expel them from the synagogue. For they, watch this whole rest of this sentence, for they loved human praise more than the praise of God. They were more concerned about what everybody around them thought than what God thought. Now, I'm going to give you 6 things here. These are key facts that are going to help you break away from this people-pleasing thing, because we all do it. Some of us have it down to a fine art. You know, some of you deserve Academy Awards. You can change character so fast, right? But let's talk about it. Let me give you some truths that'll free you from that, make you comfortable living with who you are. Here's the first one, A. Even God can't please everyone. I mean, think about it. There are 7 billion people on earth. They guesstimate there may be upwards of 2 billion people who claim Christ at different levels. Not all of them are Christ followers. Not all of them are saved. But you got about 2 billion people who claim to be Christians. So let's do some math here. So we start with 7 billion people. It's a round number, right? We're going to subtract another round number. 2 billion people, what does that leave? 5 billion people. So there are 5 billion people on the planet who are betting against Jesus. All right? They're betting against God. They are betting against the person who makes it rain, who makes it dry out, who makes the sun go up, who makes the sun go down, who brings the seasons, who gives them breath, who gives them life, who gives them health, who offers them forgiveness, who offers them salvation, who offers them eternity. They're betting against him. If God can't please them, what hope do you have of pleasing them? See? I mean, you still have a secret thought. You can please those 7 billion people. You just know you can. If you could meet them, they would like you. Even God can't please everybody. Neither can you. All right, next one, B. I don't need any man's or woman's approval to be happy. Listen, there is no question it's nice to have people's approval, right? But you don't need it. In fact, from a lot of people, you'll never have it, but that's okay because you don't need it. You don't need everyone's approval to be happy. We've said this many times here at Adventure. Happiness is it's a choice. You are as happy as you choose to be. See, what other people think of you has no relationship to your level of happiness unless you choose to let them manipulate you. You don't need their approval to be happy. It's a choice. You know, if I think I can only be happy if you like me, man, I got a long life ahead. And it's not going to be a happy life. Let me give you some quick truths here. These are not in your notes. I'm just going to rattle them off because you get these in your head. I'm just going to say what you already know. You can't please everybody. You don't have to please everybody. God doesn't expect you to please everybody. You don't need anybody's approval to be happy. And no matter what you do, somebody is going to disapprove. Is it not true if we went outside today, just pick any 5 or 6 random people, and we went outside right now and we looked up and said, there is not a cloud in the sky. It's beautiful. Someone in that group would say, I think it's supposed to rain on Tuesday. See, some of you have spent all your life trying in your mind to please an unpleasable person. You have set as your standard for being approved a wingnut. And they're not going to be. Maybe it's a parent. Maybe it was a teacher. Maybe it was a coach. They put you down. They disrespected you. They judged you unfairly. They criticized. And you at that moment decided, I need that person's approval. I've got to win their approval. And that unpleasable person, you've tried your life and you still haven't won their approval, and it hurts you. I'll tell you, I'm sorry that it hurt you. I'm sorry for that pain you're in, but let me tell you something. When you give over to the pain of not being approved by an unpleasable person, you are now in a self-inflicted prison. You have placed yourself in there because they don't have that power. And that person, you've been trying to get their approval all your life. Guess what? How old are you going to have to be before you realize you're not going to get it from them? See, it's not about you. It's not your fault. It's their problem. It's not saying anything about you. Their problem is their problem. They're unpleasable. And if you look around, they don't approve of very many people, except the ones that suck up to them. The ones that kiss up all the time. The ones that live their lives in fear of what they think. And some of you, you're 30, 50, 70 years old, and you're still trying to get somebody's approval, somebody who's unpleasable. And some of those people, you're still wondering about their approval. They're dead. Believe me, you're the last thing on their mind right now. They're gone. You don't have to have their approval. What you need to do is you need to have the attitude that Jesus had. What did Jesus say to unpleasable people? Well, I love this next scripture we're going to look at in John 5. Jesus is being verbally accosted. He's being harangued by men who, they hate him. They're not going to like him no matter what he is. They have seen him do miracles. They have seen him. They have heard him teach truth. They hate him anyhow, and they're working out a plot secretly to kill him. And here's what he says to him. Your approval means what? Nothing to me. Why? Because I know you don't have God's love within you. So you're worried about pleasing somebody who doesn't have God's love inside of them, and it's just not going to happen, folks. So you need to put your happiness, and if you're going to put it in anybody, you need to put it in the one who loves you no matter what. You need to put it in God through Jesus Christ. Watch Isaiah 51. This is God speaking. He says, I am the one who comforts you. So why are you afraid of mere humans who wither like the grass and disappear? Yet you've forgotten the Lord your Creator, the one who stretched out the sky like a canopy and laid the foundations of the earth. Will you remain in constant dread of human oppressors? Will you continue to fear the enemies, the anger of your enemies? In other words, he says, those unpleasable people. He says, you know what's going to happen to them? They're going to grow old, they're going to die, they're going to move off, they're going to divorce you, they're going to forget, they're going to have dementia, they're going to just move on to their next hateful project. What's going to happen? He says, God says, I'm going to continually comfort you. I will not abandon you. I will be there. Watch what David says about God in Psalm 27. Even if my father and my mother abandon me, the Lord will do what? He'll hold me close. Man, that's good news. That's good news. All right, let's go to the next thing. See, the world only cares about the temporary. The world only cares about the temporary. See, the reason you become a people pleaser is because you put more emphasis on the here and now than on the long term, than on eternity. And when you have short-term thinking instead of long-term thinking, you are going to mess this up every time, because what seems so important today is only temporary. I mean, the things that seem so important to you right now. Hey, why do you think they release a new fashion line every fall? Why are we all not still driving 1963 Impalas? Because every year they come out with a new one. They come out with one that's shiny. Yeah. How many of you have an iPhone 3? How many of you have an iPhone 4? You have an iPhone 3? You're a good man. Okay, how many have an iPhone 4? How many of you went and got the S as soon as the 4 came out? Or as soon as it came out? Now, how many of you have a 5? Yeah, see what happens is, I have a 4. I was going to get a 5 because I kept dropping this one. And then I found out that Dustin Hepner can fix anything. He put a new display on it. So I got Frankenphone now. I got several new parts on it. I'm going to keep it as long as I can, just on principle now. Because that 63 Impala your parents traded, that's a $70,000 car now. Yeah. So I'm going to go till I get a $70,000 phone. That's my goal. But what happens is we chase the shiny, we chase what seems important. But the truth is the things that seem important today aren't going to seem important next week or the week after that. And the stuff you feel pressured by your friends and family right now isn't going to matter in a year. Jesus calls us to live our lives at a higher level and to live our relationships at a higher level too. Luke 16. Jesus says, what this world honors is detestable in the sight of God. John 17, Jesus is praying. He says this to God. This is his last prayer to God on earth. He says, now I'm coming to you. I told them many things while I was with them in this world so they'd be filled with my joy. I've given them your word, and the world hates them because those people don't belong to the world. So if they hated Jesus, who never hurt anybody, what do you think they're going to do with you? If they didn't accept him, what are your chances? John 18, my kingdom is not an earthly kingdom. Paul says this in Philippians. But we are citizens of where? Heaven, where the Lord Jesus Christ lives, and we're eagerly waiting for him to return. 1 John 2, do not love this world, nor the things it offers you. For when you love the world, you do not have the love of the Father in you. In other words, when you are so concerned about what is going on around you and how people think about you, you don't have the love of the Father in you. For the world offers only a craving for physical pleasure, a craving for everything we see, and pride in our achievements. Oh man, those people like me, I must have arrived. Look at me. I got this new title. I am here. Yeah, he says no. He says that's what the world craves. These are not from the Father, but are from this world. And this world is doing what? Fading away, along with everything that people crave. But anyone who does what pleases God will, live forever. You know, he's comparing short-term thinking with long-term thinking. He's comparing that short-term perspective with a long-term perspective. He says short-term thinking leads to people-pleasing. Long-term thinking leads to God-pleasing. It comes down to what you've chosen to focus on. All right, I got to keep moving here. Next one, D. There's only one person I need to please. And contrary to what your school counselors told you, it is not you. You know that stuff about, this drives me crazy. It's part of why I don't allow much Disney at our house. Get this stupid princess on there, who eventually has to be rescued by a man. That's why I decided my daughter, she's gonna grow up watching Kim Possible. She can whoop the butt on any man. That's why I have her reading about Annie Oakley and not Wild Bill Cody. But you know what? You're not the person that you have to worry about pleasing. It just doesn't work that way. We've taught such a bunch of kids to be so narcissistic. You know, I only have to please one person. And that person is my Creator. That's it. I just please the Lord, the one who made me, the one who gave me my purpose in life. Listen, when you learn that all you have to do is please the Lord, that simplifies your life enormously, because you learn to live for just an audience of how many? One. Why? Because it's not about you. It's about him. John chapter 5, verse 30, Jesus says, I don't try to please myself, but I try to please who? The one who sent me. See, when I'm a people pleaser, I have allowed someone else in my life to take God's place in my life. Does it make sense? All of a sudden, they become God because they're the ultimate authority in my life and what they think of me. Their opinion matters to me more than God. And when I find myself trapped in, I find myself saying, well, I don't really want to tell them that I'm a believer because, well, they'll think less of me. I really don't want all the mocking I see people get around here when they find out I'm a believer. I don't really want to tell people that I go to church because then people are going to start saying, do you guys actually believe that? Isn't that hateful when you believe that? Galatians chapter 1. Paul is spanking a church in Galatians, by the way. you want to read a guy spank people on paper, read Galatians. Because he's like, you big babies. All right, watch this. Now, he said some pretty hard things to him. And he says, does this sound as if I'm trying to win human approval? No, indeed. What I want is God's approval. Am I trying to be popular with people? Now watch this. Underline this. If you're a people pleaser, you got to get this. If I were still trying to be popular with people, if I were still trying to please people, I would not be a what? A servant of Christ. Because you can't do both. There's only one person I need to please. Who's that? God. All right, E. One day I'll give an account of my life. One day I'll give an account of my life. Man, if you can remember that, that's kind of the people pleaser antidote here, by the way. Romans chapter 14, yes, each one of us will give a personal account to God. So when I choose a long-term view, it changes what I say, it changes what I do, it changes how I perceive all the things around me. Because when I'm in a situation, I don't have to say, man, am I going to stand up for God here, or am I just going to lay low and let this blow over? I don't have to say, who am I going to please in this situation? I don't have to say, whose approval am I going to want? Because when I take a long look and I realize someday I'm going to give an account for everything I say, what that does is that actually gives me courage, because I fear God more than I fear man. And it gives me courage to say what I need to say and do what I need to do. And it'll give you the courage to be the man God meant you to be, the woman God meant you to be in that situation that is constantly trying to put pressure on you to be politically correct or to be socially acceptable. You'll be able to stand. And I'll tell you, when I remember what Jesus did for me on the cross, when I think about him on the cross, shedding his own blood for me and the torture he went through, and in all of that, at any point, he could have stopped. He could have stopped. The scriptures say he could have called 10,000 angels to just destroy everything and set him free from that. But he didn't do that. He didn't deny me. He didn't back down. He went all the way through, and he died for my sins. He died for my selfishness. You know what? I owe that dude my life. I owe him everything about me. He forgave me. He's taken me to heaven in spite of myself. And I'm not going to deny him, and I'm not going to give up my integrity because I've chosen to take a long view. Luke chapter 9. Then Jesus said to the crowd, if any of you wants to be my follower, you must turn from your selfish ways. Quit wanting everybody else's approval. Take up your cross daily and follow me. If you try to hang on to your life, try to make everybody happy with you, you'll lose it. They'll take your life from you. You'll have to live somebody else's life. But if you give up your life for my sake, you will save it. And what do you benefit if you gain the approval of the whole world, but you're lost or destroyed yourself? If anyone is ashamed of me and my message, the Son of Man will be ashamed of that person when he returns in his glory and in the glory of the Father and the holy angels. See, if you were in a fit to please people, listen to me real carefully. You may have already denied him. You may have already denied him in numerous ways. You may have chosen to behave like someone who doesn't believe in him. You may have chosen to take the world's truth over God's truth. You may have chosen to give your love to someone who doesn't love him, and he said don't do that. You may have chosen to be more concerned with what others think about you than what he thinks. See, that's a people pleaser problem. That's a people pleaser addiction. This is an approval addiction. That's a short-term thinking issue. And if you don't correct that, that absolutely does have eternal implications. But fortunately for you, the last chapter in your life hasn't been written yet. No matter what your story has been so far, you still have time to change the ending by taking a long-term view instead of a short-term view. All right, next thing, F. God shaped me to be me. A lot of people today like saying, well, I'm just who I am. I just am what I am, and I don't have to change for anybody. You take me the way I am. You can love me or you can leave me, but I am not changing. You know what you call a person who says that? Lonely. Yeah, God shaped you to be you, but he didn't complete you. He gave you some work to do. He created you to be something far better than your sinful, human, selfish nature. He created you to be more than just your selfish instincts. In fact, he calls you to master your human nature. Romans chapter 12. With eyes wide open to the mercies of God, I beg you, my brothers, as an act of intelligent worship, to give him your bodies as a living sacrifice, consecrated to him and acceptable by him. Don't let the world around you squeeze you into its own mold, but let God remold your minds from within so that you may prove and practice that. Here, underline the whole rest of this. The plan of God for you is what? It's good. Would you bow your heads with me? Listen, God's purpose for your life is good, and other people's purpose for your life is for them. But God didn't put you here on earth to fulfill everyone else's plan for you. He put you there to fulfill his plan for you. And the plan of God for you is good. It meets all your needs and moves you toward a goal of maturity. I'll tell you today, these 6 truths that we've just looked at, they will guide you. They will keep you from being controlled by all the crazy people who want to push you into their mold. I'm going to pray. I'm just going to give you a model, and you can pray this in your own heart, put it in your own words. I'm just giving you something to kind of help you focus your thoughts. You could say something like, Father, you know how I so often let other people's approval or disapproval control my life. God, I've done a bunch of dumb stuff I really didn't want to do. I've said yes when I wanted to say no, and I've said no when I wanted to say yes. And I'm sorry for that. Father, help me to remember I can't please everybody, and I don't need to please everybody. Help me to remember that what seems important today is only temporary. It'll pass away. Help me remember that I only have to please one person, you. Help me to remember that one day I'm going to give an account of my life to you, and what's going to matter is that you shaped me to be who you made me to be, and I live to be that person. Father, give me the courage to say no when no is the right thing to say. Give me the courage to say yes when yes is the right thing to say. I want to begin today by saying yes to you, Father. Or maybe I want to reaffirm my yes to you today, Father. I thank you that you know me completely and you love me unconditionally. You love me in spite of myself. Father, I'm grateful that you offer to come in and save me and change me, to change my heart, to change my mind, to change my thinking, to change my long-term view. God, I don't want to be molded and squeezed into the world's mold. I want to become exactly who you made me to become. And from this day forward, Father, I want to grow in making you the one who matters most to me. As of this moment, Lord, you're number one in my life. From this day forward, no other gods, no other people, no other things, no other number one. You're number one. Father, help me to have the courage to maintain that commitment. And it's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.